Hi, Christina.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Slaughter. I'm one of the producers of MAMFest, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm currently on the occupied homeland of the Munsee Lenape Canarsie tribe, now known as Brooklyn, New York. And I'm a mixed race woman with black hair, glasses, and tan skin, streaming from a music studio. Christina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Christina Strain. I'm a feature and TV writer. My pronouns are she and her, and I am joining you from the occupied and unceded homeland of the Chumash people. And I am a mixed race Korean American. I have black hair, brown eyes. Currently, I'm not wearing glasses because glasses get glare. And I'm in my tiny garage office that's painted blue, and there's a James Jean print in behind me, and I like to think it's aesthetically pleasing.
It is very aesthetically pleasing. I've just got a bookcase and instruments, and my glasses have massive glare, but I'm very blind. I cannot see well without them. So
Yeah.
uh, I've got a whole little intro for you that I wrote about some of your background for people who might not have like run down your IMDb like I have. Christina Strain is a writer for comic books, televisions, and features. She has written for Marvel Comics with titles like The Runaways and Generation X. You've seen her work in TV shows like The Syfy's Magicians and Netflix's Shadow and Bone and Netflix's Finding Ohana film. Welcome, Christina.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you. For people watching, just so you know, Christina and I actually met because I produced the Shadow and Bone podcast for Netflix. And a huge part of that show is about the lead is a mixed race woman. And I was so excited to speak to you, the mixed race writer. And we had like a huge kiki.
We did. And it was so much fun. And as soon as you asked me to come back for this, I was like, yes, Melissa, let's keep chatting.
I'm so excited to have you. So you went through your background. You said you're Korean American, but just for people watching, can you give us a little bit more of your background and tell us?
So I was born and raised in Seoul, South Korea. My my dad was in the military. He was an Air Force officer stationed there, and he met my mom. And so the two of them got married. I was born in Seoul, and then my parents got divorced while they were in Seoul, so I stayed in Seoul. So I lived in Seoul till I was 18, going to school on the military base. And I moved to the US at 18, went to Louisiana State University, which is where my dad's from. No offense, Louisiana. Did not fit me very well. Going from a metropolitan city like Seoul to Baton Rouge was quite the culture shock. And then when I went to college, that was when I decided that like I love my Korean stereotypical tiger mom, but I'm not going to be a doctor, lawyer, or an engineer. I decided to pursue comics. And so I got a degree in graphic design, amazingly broke into comics at the tail end of my time in college. And then I moved to Florida for a blip for like 10 months and then moved to LA for 16 years now, something like that, a long time. So I've been in LA since, and that's how, and then I retired from comics about 10 years in because I realized I was originally a colorist. So I did art. I have an art background. And I just decided I was like, I love this job, but I really want to tell stories. So I started writing in my spare time. And then I decided to retire and went to the American Film Institute with all of my savings and pursued screenwriting there. And shockingly, I wrote a pilot there that got me staffed on The Magicians. And that's how I landed here.
Amazing.
Yes.
Mentioning comics, growing up, were you a comics fan or were you into other forms of writing?
Oh, yes. So, I think my journey to writing was one where I made a lot of weird assumptions. When I was in high school, when I was in junior high, I read a lot of comics. Like, I think growing up in Asia, because I grew up in Asia in the 90s, it was inevitable that you were going to be exposed to a lot of anime and manga. So I grew up at a time where, this was like big and I was in Asia. So I grew up reading comics voraciously. I read a few American comics, but I was primarily into manga. So when I was in high school, I loved to draw. So I drew a lot. But then at the same time, because Asian comics are usually kind of, you do all jobs, I also wrote. So I did a fair amount of writing in high school. I actually wrote a lot of prose in high school. I had a novel that I was working on that like is hilarious in retrospect because I'm like, prose is so hard. But I did write a lot. But then I think I fell in love with art. And then I pursued the art route because when I moved to the States, I realized the way comics are made is you pick one avenue and you stick with it. So then I chose colors because I drew manga style. And in the early 2000s, my dudes looked like manga dudes. So they were too pretty. So it was just like, I stopped drawing and I just started coloring and I focused on coloring. And the thing that brought me back to writing, interestingly enough, was I went from reading a genre diverse set of comics when I was in Korea, because like manhwa and manga, like, you just have options. You can read, Hikaru no Go was one of my favorite books and it's about freaking Go, it's like a chess game show. It's basically Queen's Gambit. And then I moved to the States and it was like all superheroes. So I started getting spandex fatigue and I realized the only way I was going to get to color things that weren't superheroes was if I wrote it. So originally I wrote to color. It was wild.
What is spandex fatigue?
Spandex fatigue is like what I call like when you work on just superheroes. Like I was constantly coloring spandex where I was just like the outfits. Like once I stopped coloring Runaways because the book had finally come to an end, I started coloring primarily like A-list superhero books, which is fine, but literally I was just constantly coloring spandex and I'd just be like, these are not cool outfits, man. Like after a while I want like, because with Runaways, the fashion was like a huge thing. And I was just like, I want something different. I need something different. So yeah.
Nice. You mentioned that, that you went through this transition of writing and art to focusing on art to coming back around to writing. So was there a specific moment where either in the beginning where you were really into writing the prose or later on when you came back around to writing, where you really honed in that writing was for you?
Yeah. So what's interesting is so there was like a period of time in comics where I just kind of realized I was like, there's a ceiling here and I'm about to hit it. Cause like I was doing really well in coloring and I like understood that I was one of Marvel's more valued colorists, but I was also just like I'm in my mid-20s and I don't know what I'm going to do beyond this. So I started taking these classes in 3D like design. So because I thought originally, my husband works in games, I was like, maybe I'll transition into working in 3D art for video games or features because it felt adjacent to what I was doing. And then just for fun, I started writing like webcomics just to kind of like blow off some steam. And I really liked it. So I started taking classes to kind of buy myself deadlines because I've recently discovered I have ADHD. And one of the only things that motivates me to do anything are deadlines. So I took a few classes here and there in writing, and I'll never forget, like I took a comic writing class, which I didn't need, but I wanted to do it for the community and the deadline and kind of just to do something other than coloring. And I loved it so much that one of my classmates at UCLA Extension was also a screenwriting teacher at UCLA Extension. He was like, you should try screenwriting. You'd be probably good at it. And I was like, really? And he was like, come take my class. So I took his class and I fell in love with it. And the thing that made me realize that I wanted to come back to writing was I was staying up late at night to write, which told me that like that was a sign that I was super passionate about it. And it didn't take much to motivate me to continue taking these classes. So I did that for a few years. And then I decided like, I was like, I need to pull the trigger and fully commit to writing because quite frankly, it's hard for me to write on the same day that I color. It just uses different parts of my brain. Mm-hmm. So switching between the two was harder than I expected it to be. So I was just like, I would rather write. So I'm going to take my savings and put it into grad school. So that's what I did. Yeah.
You and I both have like a kind of similar path where I started as an actor and then like you started as a colorist and then we kind of shifted into like mid-career changes where now you're a TV writer, I became a podcast producer. What were kind of the struggles that you had within that space of deciding to switch and deciding to take that risk? I mean, you talked about it a little bit, but I want to dive into it more.
Oh yeah. I think I had this massive revelation. First of all, I was super fortunate. I had, 10 years worth of savings and a supportive husband. So like that took a huge pressure off me going to grad school because he was straight up like, look, I'll just support you for the next 2 years. Like, let's do this. And so he is great. I'm still with my husband. He's great. So
Yes.
like, I had that. So that took a huge pressure off. The thing that I found shocking and I didn't expect was like in my first year at grad school, I was like having massive anxiety attacks and I had never experienced that before. Like these were all new feelings for me and I was having a hard time coping. And something my husband said to me one day kind of caught me off guard. And he was like, I have never seen you like this. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, the Christina I know is like, I can color anything. You hand me anybody's art and I can figure out in 5 minutes what I'm going to do with it. I can see it. I know what I'm going to do. You are fearless, but like now that you've gone into writing, you're suddenly terrified. And I just kind of realized, I was like, oh, that whole Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing, I am lacking that right now. The thing I am feeling is I'm going from a place of extreme confidence because I knew how to do a craft to a place where I'm not only scared about whether or not I'll make it, I don't feel confident doing this craft in the same way that I did with coloring. So it was a real wake-up call for me to get comfortable with the fact that I was going to have to be uncomfortable doing that for several years. And that was, for me, I think the hardest challenge. Because like, you know, writing requires you to look inward. So there's a certain amount of like, you're constantly like, not only criticizing yourself in your own writing and being your worst critic, but you're also asking yourself how characters get to a certain emotional place. So it's just this like deluge of emotions you're going through when you're doing it. Mm-hmm. But to add on top of that, feeling like you're absolute shit at it and you'll never be good at it because you haven't been doing it for very long is like a huge barrier. So when I realized that, like it took me a while, but I started to get more comfortable with the notion that it's okay that I sucked at it. I just needed to keep doing it until I didn't suck at it. Yeah.
That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Great answer. I think a lot of us feel the same way when we start any new creative endeavor, and we live in a time where like people start so young in different things, and people, you know, you can learn anything on the internet. I think there's this false perception that super talented people are immediately good at what they do, and they're not. They're not. They work very hard.
Yeah, they do. They work hard. And I think the other thing is a lot of super talented people make a shitload of mistakes because quite frankly, the best way for you to learn is to make mistakes. And when I say that, I mean like I've written scripts that in retrospect, I'm like, why did I think I was the person to write that script? Like I wrote this like this war movie about two people trying to get back to each other in the middle of a war. And I was like, that's not me. Nothing about that premise. Like, I don't care how like cool the premise was at the time. I was just like, this is not me.
Well, that makes me curious about something else, which is you've written like for TV, you've written an adventure film with Finding Ohana. You've written fantasy with Shadow and Bone, and like and The Magicians, and like you've got a little bit of a handhold in a couple different genres. Mm-hmm. How did you go about figuring out like what genres you liked, what genres worked for you, and maybe which ones didn't?
You know, it's interesting. All along the way, I just tried a bunch of stuff. And the thing that I learned was that like every idea I tried writing, that I didn't like was an idea that was like when I pitch it to somebody, they would light up and they would get excited. But I would also just be like not thinking beyond the pit, like the initial concept. The ideas that like really sink in with me are the ones that when I think about the premise, I just get fucking excited. Like, excuse my language, but like Finding Ohana, literally, I wrote that when I was in grad school, which is also wild. Like the fact that I wrote a pilot and a feature that like kickstarted my career in grad school is wild. But the other thing is I wrote them at the same time. So when my first year, I tried all of these scripts that everybody was like, I'd pitch concepts and people were like, oh, that's the one, write that one. And I do the thing they told me to do. And then on top of that, when you're in grad school, there's like a certain bubble you exist in. And like everybody in my class was like trying to write important art. And like, you know, it was a lot. And I was the person who was just like, I would totally write on the CW. I like CW shows. And they'd be like, what?
Yeah, it was one of the best TV shows of all time, in my opinion. And it was on the CW.
Yes, there are so many shows on the CW that I was just like, those are great shows. Why are y'all being critical of them? They're fantastic. And so like, I just had a moment where I like, in my second year, I was angry because I was just like, I keep writing stuff I don't like. What am I doing? And the first thing I said to a friend of mine when I got accepted to AFI was like, we were hanging out and he was just like, what do you want to write? And I just jokingly was like, honestly, I want to write Goonies in Hawaii. And like, I thought back to that moment and I had a thing where I was just like, I didn't know what that was, but like thinking about that made me excited. So I just sat down and I was like, what is that? And that was where Finding Ohana came from. So like, I just find that at this point in time, what I do is I kind of, this sounds so cheesy, I follow my heart. Like I ask myself, you know, like what ideas or what concepts just ignite me on fire? You know, I'm just like, I need to work on this. And then the other thing I've learned along the way is like, you know, I need a little bit of humor. It can't be too dire. Like I can go to very emotional, dark places, but I also need to find moments of levity. So like there are certain shows that like before it used to be, you know, I have this wide berth of things that I really like to watch. And now over time, just writing, I have understood, you know, what are the stories I want to tell according to like my emotions and my heart. And then what do I, as a person who can't help but crack jokes at certain times, what kind of stories can I tell? So it's been a combination platter.
I love this because along the way, it sounds like you're truly finding your voice and you're not judging it. Because I think a lot of people have that same issue of like, I have to write the big important thing and change the world. And it's like, no, sometimes you just have to write Goonies in Hawaii and it'll make you happy and therefore will make others happy.
I think that's been a huge lesson for me because it extends beyond what you think you want to write. It extends to how you write. Like you just, if you can be honest with yourself, like don't give a shit what other people think. Because quite frankly, like there is no thing you can make that everyone will like. It just doesn't exist. Even there's some jerk out there who gave Paddington 2 a bad review. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, that's right. I saw
right? Like that movie is perfect and you're wrong for disliking it. But it's a perfect example of there is no movie that's going to appeal to everybody. There's no TV show that will appeal to everybody. So the only person you really need to be appealing to is yourself. Like stop ignoring what you want to do and just ask yourself, like, what is it that like I need to see on television, you know? And then write to yourself, because if you have good taste, and fingers crossed you have good taste, what you like, other people will like, and you just got to go that way.
Yeah. I would also say that taste is one of those things that, much like talent, it takes time to cultivate and it takes time to hone. So if you feel like you don't have taste, anyone watching this, it's okay. You can develop taste. There's a Stephen Colbert quote, or I forget who said it, but somebody said like, when you are young and starting out in something, you don't have good taste, and that's okay. And it's like the learning along the way that cultivates taste.
And here's the thing I would debate. You can even not have good taste and still have a hit television or a television show. It happens all the time. Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to name names, but we're all got different shows in our minds. For sure has happened. Anyway, so again, you've written for a variety of different things. Do you prefer writing for features? Do you prefer writing for TV? What is your kind of do you like having the both?
It's hilarious because at the beginning of my writing journey, I was so sure that I wanted to be a feature person. I was like, I like telling stories at the beginning, middle, and end. And to a certain extent, I still do. Because like I love feeling like the economy of writing, like understanding that every scene really like is furthering, you know, a character's journey or the plot. Like when you watch a movie that feels like every moment counts, like you couldn't peel anything. It's just so satisfying, you know? That being said, I'm a TV person through and through. Like I have learned along the way that my adorable little, like, no, I'm a feature person self was completely wrong. And I would never have learned that had I not made, you know, I wrote way more feature scripts than I did pilot scripts before. I wrote a few pilot scripts and it was just like, oh yeah, crap, this is my thing. And then on top of that, once I got into the world of television and I started working in a writer's room, the thing I realized very quickly was like, I love breaking story with friends. Like when I'm in a good writer's room, it just is like the end of the day is so satisfying. And for me, the worst part of the whole process is the actual writing part, because then I'm alone. I'm alone with my thoughts and I have to like push through me telling myself I suck constantly. And like, I put on some sad music. I just like surviving the experience is a pain in the butt, but I love television because I think that like I have no ego. I will take your good idea and use it. I just want the story to be good.
Of course, it's a collaborative process.
Yes, and I love collaborating.
You just used a TV specific term that I want to make sure we get. Can you define breaking a story?
Yes. So the way television works, which is so fun, is that like you have a writer's room of writers. Essentially, everybody who's going to write on the TV show, we all collectively meet in a common space and we just discuss the story. And when we say we're breaking story, essentially what we do is, at the very beginning of the process is you figure out the general shape of the season, kind of like what are your 10 poles you want to hit? Where does the season have to end? Where do you think, these major events that you want to have land in certain episodes? And so you go from the macro to the micro. So you break the macro blue sky of the season, like what do we want to do? And then you get into the finer breaks of each episode. So before every writer goes off to write their assigned episode, or you collectively write however the writer's room chooses to do it, you understand everything that's in the episode. So you're not just sending somebody off to write and like, because we have to work in concert with each other. So we have to know what is in every episode. So the person who writes the next episode knows what they're building off of, and the next and the next and the next and the next. And then on top of that, as you break, you want to like seed things to set up things that happen in later episodes. So all of this goes into breaking.
Amazing. Thank you. Going from TV shows in general to the specific TV show you and I met doing press for, Shadow and Bone, we were really, and for people watching who haven't watched the show or listened to the podcast, the TV show is about a young woman named Elena Starkov who lives a very chosen one narrative in a fantasy world. In the books that the show is based off of, she is ostensibly white. And in the TV show, she is mixed Asian, which was a very purposeful choice of the showrunner. Christina wrote there. I did a podcast for it. We met there, as we already explained. But you and I talked at length about what it was like for you to write the character of Alina, to write a mixed race character. And so I want to hear about more of that in addition to what you brought to the room from your experience and how that was for you to be able to like add that to the show.
Oh my God, it was such an emotional experience. And I didn't even realize going in just how emotional it would be. Like, I've told you this, but I'm going to tell this story again. So I was on a show before Shadow and Bone called The Magicians. And I was in a position where I had done my 3-year-long contract. And it was time to kind of essentially renegotiate my contract. And they wanted to bring me back for the 5th season. And Shadow and Bone came up. And so I met with Eric. And he sent me the script. And Eric Heiser, my showrunner. And I met with him and I read the script and I was just like, Eric, I have a question. Because, I'm a mixed race Asian person. And I noticed that you made Alina, the lead, who in the books is a white Russian girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. I noticed that you made her half Asian. Are you actually going to try to do that? And he just kind of looked at me, he's like, yeah, that's the goal. And I had this like, he did not understand it at the time, but I just like, and I didn't like show it on my face, but I had this insane reaction where like, I was just like, I've written pilots. I'm a half Asian person. I've written pilots and every one of my Asian leads is full Asian. It had never even occurred to me to write my own representation. And here's this white dude who doesn't understand like the mental block I had put on subconscious mental block I had put on myself where I was just like, I'm trying to get more Asian leads, but I'm not considering myself Asian enough to put in the lead. This guy just put that in there casually. And I was just like, what is wrong with me? So that was the emotional thing that like got me on Shadow and Bone because I loved Magicians deeply and leaving that show was like really difficult for me because I loved the team. I loved my showrunners. And so like, I was like, I suddenly feel this weird sense of purpose to be on this show. Cause like, this is literally the representation 15-year-old me wanted. Like I was a high fantasy nerd in high school, never had this. She's going to look more like me than any character I've seen. I was like,
absolutely.
It's wild.
I felt the same.
Yeah. And it's so like being in that room was an interesting experience because like, I think every writer puts a bit of themselves into everything they write. It's just inevitable. You write from a place of experience and an understanding and you just input yourself into everything you write. Shadow and Bone was like, taxing is not the right word, but it was like an emotional roller coaster for me because it was just a constant series of like, pointing out things that she would be going through or like adjusting things that she would be going through or like putting a twist on things, or just like being like, here, we should include this. Like there were just so many things along the way that like I would highlight in the room or just have to like mention. And then also I was constantly doing the mental math of asking myself, you know, is this representation going to be enough for people? Like that, you know, the thing that comes with being the only Asian in the room, you're also doing the like constant checking of yourself where it's like, is this harmful? Is this good? Is this? And, but at the same time, this is true to me. And like, is this going to upset me? So there's like, it was like I didn't understand before I went through it how taxing it was going to be on me. So at the end of that first season, I just remember being like, I'm so tired. I just want to work on like the society where they're all white. Like,
I could just put myself to the side. Just
if I could take a second to not think about what it means to be half Asian, that would be incredible. So yeah, it was good. But then like, I got so emotional watching it because like there were all these things that, you know, like I knew things were coming. And then watching it was a combination of hard because, you know, we put her through the racist paces. We don't make it. Yeah, we do not make it easier for her. So watching it is super freaking hard on multiple levels, you know, knowing the contributions that I made and like understanding that like I have been through similar things. And then on top of that, my white dad is going to watch this and he and I have had conversations where he's told me no one's racist to Asians. And I'm just like not telling him about things that have been said to me. And I'm just like, now he's going to watch this and he's going to wonder if this has happened to me. And we'll probably never talk about it because that's how we work.
Same.
But like, it was a lot. But then at the same time, the satisfaction of seeing myself on TV was just mind blowing. It was like an emotional experience that I wasn't expecting. So yeah, when we found out we were getting a second season, he was like, do you want to come back? I was like, do I ever? Like, yes, let's go.
Yes. And for folks who haven't watched the show, please watch it. When we say like the racist emotional ringer, it's all like I immediately when I was watching it, recognized so many things that I have been through, and I had very emotional reactions, and people on my team were like, I think it's a little much. And I was like, let me explain to you what is going on. And once I explained it, they were like, oh, I understand this. Okay. And it really changed the game.
I mean, talking to you was the first time I like got teary-eyed and lost it in an interview.
Oh, yeah, we interviewed twice for that, and we cried both times. I was very emotional the second one. We cried a lot in the second one. We took it all out of the podcast, but there's a lot of tape of just you and me crying. It's very intense because it's an intense thing to see yourself to be seen is really intense. It's very emotional. And for you were able to put yourself out there in a way that I think is even more and you, like you said, you were the only Asian in the room, and you've alluded to this, and I know this, like you had a very supportive room.
Yes.
But it is still, to be the only one is a lot. And I think you did a beautiful job.
Thank you. My room, and again, my room was so supportive. It is really hard. Being the only of anything is really difficult because like you do feel the pressure of having to stand up for those people. But like I want to give Eric so much credit. Like he's so good at listening. Like, and everybody else in the room too. Like, you know, we can have very intense conversations about like anything. But then there are definitely moments where it's very clear one of us is trying to express a personal truth and everybody will listen. So like, it's a wonderfully supportive room in that way, which was like, considering how sensitive a lot of the topics that the show like covers is like incredible. Cause there are shows where people will shut you down and not care, you know, but like Eric created a nurturing room that like allows us to express ourselves in a way that is rare. It can get raw. I mean, you've seen the show.
Again, I highly recommend it. Please, everyone see the show. It's just beautiful. We're almost out of time. So I have one last question before we wrap up. And that's really, you know, this might sound generic, but I'd love to know, what is your advice for aspiring writers?
Oh, man. There's a lot of advice out there, so I want to give something slightly unique. I recently talked to a young writer who has ADHD, and something that I said to them was basically, you know, I figured out along the way pre my ADHD assessment what works for me in terms of my writing habits. And instead of reading how-to writing books, I just stopped and was like, what are the things that I'm quote unquote good at? What are the things that I'm quote unquote bad at? And how do I make adjustments to suit those things? And I told them this advice, and they were like, you're the first person who's ever given me permission to like write out of order, or understand that the last 2 days before a deadline, you're a hot, mess, or you have to organize things in a way that works for you. Cause like a lot of writing advice that comes out from people is a very standard sort of like, write every day, write in this way,
I don't.
Yeah.
Hours. Yeah, it's very structured.
Exactly. I think the most important thing that you can do for yourself is like genuinely look inward and be honest about what you can and can't do. And quite frankly, if there are things that you think you're quote unquote bad at, which like scheduling or whatever like that, stop thinking about it that way and start asking yourself like, this is how I operate. What do I need to change in order to do that? Like, I know at the beginning of a script, I tend to tinker in scenes and I will live in scenes for too long. So the thing that I do nowadays is I write the scenes I'm most excited about first. And I save the scenes that I'm least excited about last, because I know towards the tail end of a writing stint, I will burn through scenes because I am terrified of missing a deadline. So anything that I don't really care as much about finessing or being finicky with, I save to the end so that I can just burn through it. Everything that I care about, I write at the beginning. So that if I'm going to tinker, I'm tinkering on something that I care about, or a thing that I know is going to take me a while to figure out, I start at the beginning. Like, figure out what works for you and just do that. Like, I don't care what people on Twitter say. Ask yourself, like, really, how do I work, and how do I work with how I work?
I love that. I think that's beautiful advice. This has been lovely. I always love catching up with you. Where can people find you and your work if they want to follow you?
I am really only on Twitter. My Instagram is private because it's got my kids on it, and I don't like posting pictures of my kids. But, yeah, I'm like, they need to have a normal life. I am on Twitter under Christina Strain. It's just my name, very boring, and that's about it. I tweet about usually not really about work. I tweet about BTS and TV shows I like. So
perfect. I love
that's
that.
me.
A wholesome Twitter thread. Oh, and Dev Patel. Later, you and I will talk about great.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Christina. This has been lovely, and thank you for joining us at ManFest.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.